Enjoy your meeting. Just a reminder, today's meeting is being recorded.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm David Hadobas, President and CEO of CC&G, and I'm here again with Richard Kenny. Richard's the head of global contact center marketing for Plantronics. And Plantronics has been a long-time CC&G partner, and from time to time we get to check in with some of their team. Richard, again, thank you for taking time with us today. And we want to get some quick video perspectives of what's going on. Richard's a bit of a unique position because he does literally travel the globe. And I want to start there because, Richard, good morning, welcome. Tell us a little bit about where you've been.
So good morning, David, or good afternoon from the UK. So it feels like I've been around the world since we last spoke. I've been to Hong Kong, China, I've been out to Australia and the Philippines, and also into Canada and the US a couple of times, but also out to quite a few countries in Europe as well, so Spain, France, Germany, and the Netherlands. But today, I'm actually connecting in from our UK offices here at Plantronics just outside of Swindon. And
well, we appreciate you taking the time.
That's all right, thank you. It's been really interesting to go around the world. It's, you know, the old phrase about the world being flat. It does seem to be true for our business, not in a derogatory sense, but in terms of it's the same the world over. We're all looking at the same sort of challenges, the same sort of background disruption is taking place in each of the different industries. Well, yeah, we may be at different places along that curve. So mature markets are a bit more advanced. Some of the more emerging markets are not quite there yet, but we're all sort of heading on that real big challenge of improvement along this curve.
You know, I'm curious, and I know today we're going to talk a little bit about the definition of customer support operations and how that may vary, you know, both from 20 years ago to present day, but also on a global front. Let me start with that. You know, CC&G got its start almost 30 years ago when call center was basically the primary channel of communication, short of mail and fax. But as we see the conversations and the channels evolving over the years, contact center and some other things. So we've heard customer service, customer support, contact center, call center, customer experience. You know, where are we now from your perspective, and why in the heck does that matter?
So, like I said, I think that many countries are on different stages in their journey, and where we are now really is this recognition that an old model of having the call center on its own just isn't going to work for the future. If we look at the way that interactions have changed, we started off with call center, we added on lots of different extra channels to become contact centers, and we've then moved into this sort of self-service world that took away some of those interactions into an automated process. And that brings the much more complex operations coming into, let's call it the contact center for now. But more and more of those operations need the help of the rest of the departments in our organization to solve them. My example that I always use is banking. 20 years ago, I rang up my bank to find my bank balance. And it was a 20-second phone call. They gave me my balance. It was no problem. But now what I have to do is I have to ring into the bank for much more complicated queries, like credit card fraud, for example. And to do that, the bank needs to give me a much longer phone call. It needs to interact with so many other different channels, so many other different departments. It's almost like a collaboration seems to be there an awful lot more. So I think we need to move away from this idea of call center because it indicates a siloed department, something that stands alone. We have the call center, and then the rest of the organization. Now what I see the leading organizations do is bring contact centers or customer service into the rest of their organization. So a good example is when I was in Australia, I saw what they called smart hubs or customer experience hubs, where they connected the front end of an organization with all of the processes that follow it up under a single department. So what they were able to do is drive the customer contacts at the front end, and then there was one person responsible for taking that customer contact right the way through the rest of the process. So you've got a single owner, a single process, and it's really well integrated within the organization. And that does seem to be where organizations are going now, is that rather than just trying to provide a service, they're trying to provide an experience. Contact centers are moving along this different path of ease. So the letter E. The first E is efficiency. How many calls can I do per day? The next one is effectiveness. How well can I do my job? And the final one is experiences. How much will that customer remember me? And to provide that experience, it's got to be an integrated approach across many different departments. The contact center is just one of those touch points. There's marketing touch points, there's websites, there's self-service, there could be retails, there could be face-to-face. So it's that provision of a customer experience, which is where many organizations are trying to get to at the moment, which needs really an integrated structure for a company.
Mm. You know, you bring up service, support, possibly sales, and I'm hearing you say it's coming together, but I'm also starting to hear, and of course we see this, more silos, because the customer, the social support team and the customer experience team and the traditional call center team and perhaps others are maybe not a part of the same platform. Can you kind of speak to how that's integrating in the leading edge companies?
Yeah, a few years ago we used to have what we called multi-channel agents, which was this recognition that maybe one person in an organization could handle all the different channels. What I see that's happening now in a lot of the leading organizations is that those individuals are specializing more. So the right person that you hire for phone support is not going to be the same person for written support on web chat. They're not going to be the same sort of person for face-to-face. But where we are seeing the integration is that sort of layer above that. So even those individuals might be separate. They're not actually in silos. They're separate, but they're managed and governed by a single process across the organization. So you might find that it's a chief experience officer or a chief customer officer. I've also heard, VP customer for life. All the very different titles, but the aim really is to put the customer at the center of the process. What we've also seen in some other companies, this one was from Germany, was they defined their market into 8 different personas. And then there were teams formed to match the journey that each of those personas took. And again, the contact center was one of the steps along the way, but they were an equal step compared to all the other ones of web chats, retail stores, social media, advertising. So again, specialists in their roles, which I really like the title of being a specialist on the phone or a specialist for web chat, but all managed under a single a single process or a single end-to-end solution.
Okay, so there's the process side of this. There's the corporate cultural side of this. Of course, there's the customer impact side of this. Before I get to culture and customer impact, though, help me understand and please explain to our audience, the majority of the people that we see on a regular basis are somewhere in the middle. They're in that transition mode. So they haven't quite got there. Everything you explained is the way the leading edge companies have, what they have achieved. But what do you have to say to the people who are trying to make the business case to move down the road towards that, again, the way you described the shared process?
I think that achieved might be a strong word. I think the word achieving is better for most of the companies. It's always the case for people that we use a sort of single solution or 1 or 2 people, and everybody sort of gravitates towards them as that's what everybody should be doing. But no, not everybody is anywhere near there yet. We're still looking at a significant amount of organizations that are still doing inbound phone calls only. And there's nothing wrong with doing that if you're doing that really well. If that's what matches your customer base, then keep on doing that and keep on doing it really well. But where you start to want to expand, I would start with your customer. For me, the customer is always the most important point. What is your customer doing? What is your customer's expectations? What channels are they expecting to use? So you might look at your customer base and think, actually, I only need to add one more channel, which is email. Or I might need to only add a small bit of social network as well to bring that together. And there's many vendors out there that will start to offer integrated solutions across those two. So you can get the same context from a phone call onto social media. So for me, it's like, don't feel concerned that you're not doing absolutely everything. There's only a few companies out there that are doing omni-channel or customer experience or whatever you want to call it really well. Most people are on that learning stage of where's their customer, which channels do their customer want to use, and how do we start to expand those. What we've also got to recognize is that the contact center is really at the heart of all of this. It is the one place in the organization that can do large amounts of interactions. What we've seen in the past is that marketing have tried to take over social media and call it a marketing channel. It doesn't work because the marketing department isn't set up to do massive amounts of interactions. That's what the contact center is good at, that engaging with customers and doing it on a large scale. I also think that when you talk about customer journey, which is another phrase that comes in, everybody assumes that each step on the customer journey has the same emotional or value. For a customer, it doesn't. It's really easy to tweet. It's really easy to write an email. It's very difficult to make a phone call. And that's where the customer puts the most emotional investment. So again, the contact center's really got to recognize this is our place. We are at the center of this, but we are the place where the customer puts the most emotional investment. In the past, an escalation used to be an employee reaching out to a supervisor. Now, an escalation is a customer calling us because they can't get self-service to work. And that's what the contact center's got to recognize. Don't feel devalued because we're not in the sort of sexy digital space. Feel like we're the most important because we can do things at scale and we can deal with the customer's emotions.
It's a great point. What do you say to those organizations who culturally haven't made that shift towards the focus on the customer? And they're still, I don't want to quite say they're stuck in the world of the contact center is a necessary evil. It's not a profit center. It's, hey, if we just did our jobs better, made better products, whatever, we wouldn't need that level of service. What do you say to an organization who's struggling with that corporate culture?
You've either got to go absolutely all in, which is almost, let's call it the Amazon model for now, where they've openly spoken about the best service is no service, in which case you've got to automate absolutely everything and guarantee that it works, so there's no need to provide service. Or you've got to recognize actually that more and more everything that you do about service is in the public domain. Customer service could be the new marketing. If you read some of the predictions, if you do customer service well, your customers are on social media, they will promote you on social media for giving that good service. And that social media sharing is digital and it's permanent. So if you make one bad step, that error is always visible on someone's Twitter account or someone's Facebook page. So that's where those companies have got to recognize is that it used to be the company was in control. They controlled the channels, the times, the information. Now the power has moved into the customer's hands. The customer wants to choose the channel. The customer can record the phone call. They can put it onto social media and share it in different ways. So we've really got to recognize that the power now is in the customer's hands.
We hear a lot about engagement and both on a positive side and a negative side. But it does seem to me that part of this shift is embracing the fact that engaging with my customer can really drive loyalty. Have you seen some examples of leading companies that are really making that effort to engage with their clients, and what's the impact?
I definitely have, David. However, I haven't seen it as much as I would like to on the voice interaction side. If you look to the social media channels, and I'd pick out people like Netflix, Sainsbury's in the UK, you can see their employees engaging on social media. For them, social media is not a marketing channel. It's a customer experience or a customer engagement channel. And their employees are empowered to go out and have fun on those channels. You see that their tweets are retweeted and shared. They're held up as case studies because their employee was just having a bit of fun with the customer. And they got exactly the right tone of voice and the balance. So I see those sort of leading edge companies doing a great job of engagement on social media. If people are doing it on voice calls, we can't hear about it yet. I'd love to hear about it more. I'd love to see some recordings on SoundCloud or somewhere like that to show that people were able to have that fun. And most importantly, that empowered status. You know that you can have fun on social media because you've been empowered to do so by the company. Whereas in the contact center world, we seem to be a little bit more boxed in and scripted at the moment still. So that's where I'd look to sort of digital best practices, those really good social media engagements, not social media marketing.
Well, and there's a time and a place, right? So we're having a difficult time because you've lost my package. I don't really want to have this jovial, happy-go-lucky conversation. I'm frustrated. You know, my internet's down, whatever the issue is. So there's time and a place for that. And engaging with the customer, and we hear a lot about empathy over sympathy, means that our agents are getting, the demand on our agents is becoming more. We also hear that the last point is the voice contact. So I may, other things didn't work, so I ended up talking to you, and it's already heightened because of my experience and my journey thus far. Any other examples of how people are doing that? Again, when it ends up in the call center on the tail end of a good or bad journey.
Well, the first thing is that people have an expectation of self-service at the moment. They expect that to be their first channel, which is great because it's easy to use. But where I've seen companies do a really good job is recognizing that if a customer wants to escalate from self-service, they want to do it quickly. So make that phone number visible when the customer wants it and get that person straight through to a human. Recognize that that voice call is the last part of a journey, and there's an incredible amount of frustration that's possibly built up by that point. Like I said, this is the step in the journey that the customer has got the most emotional investment in. So get through to a person quickly. Never mind an IVR, never mind, different options, different phone numbers, sorry, we're closed. Get them through to a person really quickly. And I might sort of pick you up on one of the words you used there, which is you talked about agents as employees. It's a little bit of one of my pet hates, but I think that the work that people do in contact centers is much more difficult, much more complex than it ever used to be. And we need a new job title. If you look at the analysts, people like Frost & Sullivan have called them brand ambassadors in the past. Now, maybe that's not the right title, but that really doesn't reflect the importance of the people. So again, if you look at how much emotional investment that customer makes, let's get really good people on the phones. Let's train them up. Let's reward them better. Let's make them sort of the pride of the organization, because they're the ones that have got to handle those really emotional stages in that customer journey. So for me, one of the big changes I do see that sort of ties up with a change in naming is the change in naming of the employee. Customer care managers, customer care professionals. Customer service reps is a good one if they're in support, but sometimes their role is more general, more proactive than that. So customer care or customer managers is a really good one.
Excellent point. I can almost sense the people behind me standing up and applauding on that one. The air of respect. Hey, as we kind of pull things together here, speaking of support, I understand you guys were recently acknowledged by Frost & Sullivan. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's an initiative that's been driven out of our own customer service department, which is what they were called then. They've now moved over to being the customer experience team. But our VP worldwide is a guy called Paul Vandenberg, and he wants to show that Plantronics practices what we preach. He wants to show that we can deliver the best customer service, because not only do we look after our own employees, we really look after our customers as well. So simple things like there's only one IVR option. You get straight through to an employee. We give our employees 10% project time because they're empowered to go off and fix things. And what that's culminated in is a global award from Frost & Sullivan in the last week, where they've recognized that we're one of the worldwide best providers of customer service within the industry. So it's really a privilege to receive this award from Frost & Sullivan.
Well, wonderful, and congratulations. You guys deserve it. Hey, last comments. We know that some of our members and our partners were participating in Enterprise Connect this year, 2016. Can you just give us a quick overview of what you saw, what you think, what were your perspectives?
I think for me it's my first time there, so it was a little bit of almost a shock to start with, to find that it was quite technology, quite vendor oriented. I was hoping to hear a little bit more of the customer stories, but when you recognize then that sometimes this is the way the industry sets the trends. And probably the biggest one for me is, again, back to this move on who we are, back to this move on what we call ourselves. In the past, it always seemed like the PBX or the ACD was the center of everything. This was the bit that stored all of our interactions with customers. But now there's a recognition that actually our customers interact with us in so many different ways, and it's actually now the CRM system that is the center of everything. CRM system is the part that tracks the customer journey. And so for me, that was a real good indication of the change in status of our industry. We're no longer built around just a phone model, because that's gone now. We're built around this idea of better understanding our customers and all of their interactions with us. So that for me was the sort of real big takeaway. It may not be a surprise to some of our, the members here because they've been used to doing this for a while, but we've come from the voice background in Plantronics. So for us to suddenly see this was actually quite a big change in the center of an organization. And it really is a positive step for me, actually. It indicates that we're becoming much more customer-centric, wanting to place that customer knowledge at the heart of our organization.
Well said. I'm glad you shared that with us, and I'm glad I asked the question. So we're going to wrap it up here. We've taken enough of your time today, but Richard, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to check in with you, and we get an education of what's going on both on a global front, a little bit about what's important in the world of Plantronics, but your perspectives and ability to share what your customers and leading organizations are doing is greatly appreciated. So thank you for taking time today.